It is the 11th of March. 10 years ago on this day, the world witnessed a disaster, the worst nuclear tragedy since Chernobyl. It happened in Japan. On the 11th of March 2011, Japan witnessed a threefold disaster. There was an earthquake measuring 9 on the Richter scale, one of the strongest on record. It triggered a tsunami that set off waves at least 17 meters high. They crashed into Japan's northeastern coast and caused a nuclear meltdown. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant was hit. 3 nuclear reactors at this plant broke down and spewed radiation far into land, sea and air. The tragedy busted the myth of absolute safety, a myth that nuclear power proponents had nurtured for decades. At least 120,000 homes were destroyed, more than 160,000 people had to flee, and almost 20,000 people did not survive. The sheer scale of the disaster stunned the world. It prompted an emergency review of nuclear energy policies. Several nations promised to decommission nuclear projects. Germany even embarked on an exit plan from nuclear energy. The last German reactor, we are told, will be powered down by 2022. But what about the rest of the world? The legacy of the disaster is alive in public consciousness, but it seems to have done very little to change our approach. The world is still exploring nuclear energy options. As I speak, about 50 countries are utilizing nuclear energy, and there are more than 440 nuclear power reactors. How secure are these? Can they withstand natural disasters? This report explores.
With a moment of silence, 1,000 people gathered in Tokyo to mark the 10th anniversary of the Fukushima tragedy. Japan's Emperor Naruhito led the prayers in honor of the dead. Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga asked Japanese citizens not to let the lessons fade away.
I hope people in difficult situations will not be left behind, and that they will be able to return to their peaceful everyday lives as soon as possible.
We must never let the valuable lessons learned from the great sacrifices made in the disaster fade away.
284 kilometers away in Fukushima, locals are hopeful about the future, but worries still linger.
We have not recovered at all. There is still vacant land, so there is nothing to see in Fukushima prefecture. Only a few people have come back.
10 years since the catastrophe, this is what's left of the nuclear facilities in Fukushima. Devastated buildings, damaged ports, flooded fields, and a lot of radiation. The Japanese government has spent about $300 billion to rebuild the region. But its own figures reveal that only 15% of Fukushima's core area has been decontaminated. If Japan, a scientifically advanced country, could struggle with decontamination, one can hardly fathom what the situation would be in other parts of the world. Nuclear energy is still the world's second largest source of low-carbon power. It provides 10% of the world's electricity. There are 440 nuclear reactors in some 50 countries around the world, and 50 more nuclear reactors are under construction. Canada has 19 operable nuclear reactors that generate 15% of the country's electricity. The United States has 94 reactors that generate 20% of its electricity. The United Kingdom has 15 reactors that generate 16% of its electricity. In South Korea, 24 nuclear reactors account for 26% of the electricity. In Russia, 38 reactors are generating 20% of the electricity. 49 nuclear reactors in China are generating 5% of the country's electricity. 23 nuclear reactors in India are generating 3% of the electricity. And in France, just 56 nuclear reactors are generating 71% of the country's electricity. Scientists say that these power plants are the safest way to produce electricity, but meltdowns like the one in Chernobyl and Fukushima reveal just how vulnerable they are. The possibility of another catastrophe cannot be dismissed. In 2018, Greenpeace activists in France broke into a nuclear plant to illustrate its vulnerability. Lawmakers even declared that the plant could easily be accessed by terrorists. In the United States, nuclear plants are running out of ways to store highly radioactive waste. The site selected for dumping waste is the Yucca Mountain in Nevada, a place that is both volcanically and seismically active. In India, nuclear plants have operated safely during earthquakes. It is because most of them are in weak seismic zones, but they lie in coastal areas. They have never really been tested against a tsunami, except in 2004, when the Kalapakkam atomic reprocessing plant was flooded when a tsunami hit the Tamil Nadu coast. The Fukushima tragedy was a failure in acknowledging environmental risks. The tragedy is far from over for hundreds of thousands of Japanese people. What lessons have we learned? Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.